All right, let's dive in. Today, we're exploring microdosing psilocybin.
Ooh, interesting.
We've got a YouTuber's personal experiment to unpack, and some research, and even the legal stuff. Should be a fun one.
Sounds like it. Yeah, it's a hot topic these days, for sure. Lots of buzz, but we got to be critical too, right? Anecdotes are great, but we need the science.
Totally. We're mainly looking at Joe Scott's, he's the Answers with Joe guy on YouTube.
Right, right.
He did a whole month of microdosing. Can you believe it?
Wow, a whole month. That's commitment.
Viewers voted for it, actually.
Right.
Seems everyone's curious about psychedelics and what they can do, like therapeutically.
Yeah, definitely. People are looking for alternatives, especially for mental health, but got to separate hype from the real deal. Joe's just one guy.
For sure, for sure. One thing he mentioned, he tried psilocybin years ago, just once. And get this, it helped him with some personal insecurities he had.
Interesting.
Said it was so powerful, he couldn't even remember what was bothering him for like a month after.
Wow. Shows you the potential, right?
Yeah.
Shifting perspectives, even if it's temporary, but long term, who knows?
Right. So for his microdosing, tiny dose every 3 days, he tracked his focus, mood, all that.
Makes sense.
The first day, though, he felt kind of swimmy, he said. Like strong cold medicine. You ever get that?
Oh, yeah, I know that feeling. Even microdosing can do that. Messes with your senses a little.
Interesting. Now, here's the kicker. His focus and creativity. No big change, which is what he'd hoped for, but he felt different emotionally.
Okay, how so?
More connected to his wife, more expressive, sharing feelings, which, he says, is not him usually.
Fascinating. Fits with what some people say, microdosing makes you more aware emotionally. But got to be careful with, expectancy bias. If you go in expecting benefits, you might just think you feel them, even if nothing's changed.
So our minds can trick us, basically.
Oh, absolutely. Happens all the time.
One story really stuck with me. He saw a 9-year-old photo of himself on Facebook. Bam, hit with this wave of sadness.
Oh, wow.
He was struck by how much younger he looked. Better even. But at the time, didn't even realize it. Too wrapped up in insecurities back then.
That's powerful. Psychedelics, even tiny doses, they can dig up stuff, Buried emotions, memories, like seeing yourself with new eyes.
Totally. And even his wife noticed a change. She pointed out that the Facebook post, he'd never normally share something like that.
Interesting.
Made him wonder if the microdosing was making him more, vulnerable, open about his feelings.
Could be. Those personal observations, even without hard proof, they're valuable, Shows there's something going on psychologically. Definitely needs more study.
Absolutely. Let's get into the sciencey stuff. Joe mentioned psilocybin affects a brain part called the claustrum, like the control center for our sense of self, our ego.
Right, the claustrum. Super complex area, connected
Yeah.
to all sorts of things, attention, perception, even our identity.
Whoa, that's deep. So how does this tie into microdosing?
Well, the thinking is psilocybin messing with the claustrum can maybe cause ego death. It's like loosening that rigid sense of self. People describe feeling connected to everything.
Wow, sounds intense.
It can be, but got to separate a full-on psychedelic trip from microdosing.
Right.
Microdosing is subperceptual, so small you don't get the hallucinations or anything. It's about maybe getting those benefits, focus, mood, creativity, emotional stuff, without the crazy trip.
So a little nudge instead of being launched into space.
Exactly. Fine-tuning your mind, not derailing your day. Fascinating stuff. Lots of potential, especially for mental health. But more research is key, always.
Research. He mentioned set and setting being super important too, right? Like your mindset and environment really affecting the experience.
Oh, absolutely. Huge factor. Feeling safe, supported, that can make it positive. But stress, chaos, amplifies anxiety, even with microdoses. Think of it like the foundation, set, and setting. They shape how the substance works in your mind.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Got to prep the ground, so to speak.
Exactly. Now, to understand this whole microdosing craze, it helps to look back, at psychedelic research history.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride for psychedelics, huh?
Big time. Popular in the 50s, 60s, counterculture and all that. Then Nixon's war on drugs, bam, psilocybin, Schedule I drug. Research shut down for decades.
Wow.
It wasn't until 2000 that Johns Hopkins got permission to study psilocybin, healthy volunteers. Their 2006 study, groundbreaking, showed psilocybin could create these mystical experiences, meaningful for people, even spiritually.
So the spiritual side is what got research going again. Wild.
Kinda, yeah. Highlighting that aspect made it more acceptable, maybe, after all the demonization, and thankfully, research kept growing from there.
That's great to hear. Catching up after all that lost time.
We are, we are.
Yeah.
Then, 2008, Johns Hopkins, they published safety guidelines for these studies. Opened the door for more research, a lot of it privately funded, because that schedule, I think, is still a hurdle.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And then, get this, 2020, the National Institutes of Health, they gave their first grants for psychedelic studies in over 50 years. Shows you, the scientific world's taking it seriously now.
It's about time. But we still got a long way to go, right? Figuring out how microdosing actually works, what it can really do.
Oh yeah, tons more to learn. Now, Joe mentioned a few studies worth digging into. One from 2019, Macquarie University in Australia, 98 people, microdosing for 6 weeks, tracking their well-being, all that.
Interesting setup. What'd they find?
Well, they saw increased psychological function, but only on the dosing days. Off days, back to normal. They also saw less depression and stress, less distractibility, even better information absorption, they said. But there's a catch.
A catch.
Some folks, their neuroticism actually went UP.
So good and bad, maybe. Always a trade-off, it seems.
It seems like it. And gotta remember, expectancy bias. If people think it'll help their focus, they might report it does, even if it doesn't. Tricky stuff.
How do you even account for that scientifically?
Gold standard, double-blind, placebo-controlled study. Neither the people and or the researchers know who's getting what. Minimizes that expectation stuff.
Smart. Did they do that in this study?
They tried. To address the bias thing, they did another study, way bigger, 263 people, some experienced microdosers, some newbies, had them predict the effects beforehand, see if it lined up with what they found before.
So trying to outsmart those expectations, basically. What happened?
Mixed bag, really. Some predictions were spot on, others, like the information thing and the neuroticism, those were surprises.
So it's still kind of murky, whether those are real effects or just in their heads.
Yeah, it's not simple, that's for sure. Thankfully, newer research is shedding more light. For example, 2022, University of British Columbia, a huge study, 935 people microdosing for 30 days. They found a pretty consistent link with better mental health, but less so in folks over 55.
Huh. So age matters? Maybe? This was a big study. Was it double-blind, placebo-controlled, all that?
Not quite. It was observational. So they relied on people self-reporting, not a controlled lab setting. Gives you insights, but not as scientifically rigorous.
Right. You can see trends, but not necessarily cause and effect.
Exactly. Now, a month after that, University of Buenos Aires, they did the gold standard study. 34 volunteers either microdosing with half a gram of dried mushrooms or placebo. They even used EEG, brainwave stuff.
Ooh, fancy. So this one should have given some solid answers, right? What'd they find?
Well, the psilocybin group, did ED have more pronounced effects? But T, here's the twist.
A twist. Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me.
The positive stuff. Mainly in the folks who knew they weren't getting the placebo. Those who couldn't tell didn't benefit as much.
So even when you control for it, expectation still sneaks in. Powerful stuff, our minds.
Powerful indeed. Our beliefs affect us, even physically. It's wild.
Amazing how intertwined it all is. This whole microdosing thing really brings that home. Sounds like a lot we don't know still. How much is placebo? How much is real?
Lots of research left to do, for sure. Untangling that web.
Definitely. But there's another layer to all this that we got to talk about, and it's the law.
Ah, yes. The legal side. Where it gets tricky, very tricky.
Because all this interest in the benefits, but psilocybin. Still, Schedule it federally.
Yup. Illegal to have, illegal to sell, even tiny amounts. Kind of clashes with all the excitement, doesn't it? Shows you the tension between science, culture, and the law trying to catch up. Something Joe was very aware of, sharing his experiment publicly.
Yeah, he mentioned being nervous about it, even though he made it clear he wasn't telling people to break the law or anything.
Good on him. Gotta acknowledge that reality, even while exploring all this new stuff.
Absolutely. But good news is some places are easing up on the strictness, right?
Yep. Decriminalization's spreading, especially in cities. Denver, Santa Cruz, Oakland, Ann Arbor, they've basically said small amounts, not a priority to prosecute. And some states went further.
Oregon, for example.
Right. Oregon, they decriminalized. PLUS, they made these healing centers, legal ones. People can use psilocybin there with trained facilitators. Pretty groundbreaking, recognizing the potential in a controlled setting.
Wow, that's a huge step. Still lots of confusion out there, I bet. Joe was talking about all the mushroom gummies, drinks popping up everywhere. Like, how's that legal if psilocybin is illegal?
It's a gray area for sure, confusing. A lot of those products, they don't actually have VE psilocybin. They use other mushrooms like Amanita muscaria, different psychoactive compound, or they use psilocybin derivatives, kind of skirting the law.
So, a legal jungle out there. Back to Joe for a sec. What was his takeaway after the month? What did he conclude?
Well, no mind-blowing focus like he'd hoped, but he did feel those emotional shifts, subtle but real. More in touch with his feelings, more open, even a bit more joyful.
That's pretty big for a guy who describes himself as, pretty even keels, not super emotional. Like, it opened something up in him.
Yeah, exactly. Access to a range he might not have had otherwise. Fascinating stuff.
But he stressed, this is his experience, right? Not everyone's going to be the same.
Right, he was very clear about that. Don't expect life to magically change from microdosing. It's different for everyone, not a cure-all.
I like that, the honesty. Especially online, where everyone's hyping things up. But he also hammered home the legal risks, didn't he?
Repeatedly. Psilocybin is illegal, folks. Don't break the law.
Good reminder.
Yeah.
Okay, we've covered a ton on Joe's story, the science, the research history, the legal mess. So what's the big takeaway here? What does it all mean?
$1 million question, right. No easy answer. But we're seeing a huge shift in how we think about these substances. Demonized for so long, now they're, making a comeback. The research is promising. Culturally, people are more open. It's a new era, maybe.
Like we're rediscovering them, not just to get high, but to heal, to grow. Microdosing is just one part, but it's sparking a lot of interest, that's for sure.
Absolutely, and those conversations are important. We got to talk about this stuff openly and honestly, the good, the bad, the ethical stuff. It's about responsible research, figuring out the rules, giving people accurate info so they can decide what's right for them.
Couldn't agree more. Feels like we're at a crossroads with psychedelics. The choices we make now, they'll echo for a long time.
No doubt about it. Defining moment. Gotta be careful, but also open-minded.
Man, more questions than answers after this deep dive.
Yeah.
But it's made me want to learn more, that's for sure. Where's this whole microdosing thing going? What do we discover next?
I'm with you. This is just the start, and it's going to be fascinating.
To all our listeners out there, we've got links to everything we talked about in the show notes. Dive in, explore.
Always good to go to the source. Form your own opinions. Don't just take someone else's word for it.
Exactly. Before we let you go, one final thought to chew on. We've got this mixed evidence, the legal gray areas, the personal experiences.
Yeah.
So how do you think society's going to view these substances in the future? Will they stay taboo? Or will we embrace them more, change the laws, change how we treat people medically?
That's the question, isn't it? Research is revealing more and more about how these things work in our brains, our consciousness. It's a journey worth taking, carefully and with open minds, both.
Well said. Until next time, folks, keep exploring, stay curious, and don't be afraid to question everything.
Absolutely.
Happy exploring.
Makes you think, like the stigma's fading, but the laws are still stuck in the past.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Research hinting at benefits, people getting interested, but legally it's a mess. Definitely confusing.
Totally. Creates this tension, I guess. People seeing the potential versus the caution, it's a legal crowd, the bad reputation from before.
Like we're in between figuring out how to, fit these substances into society responsibly. So much to consider: science, personal stories, what's normal, and the law, of course.
It's a latte, yeah. That's why talking about it matters so much. Gonna be nuanced, hear different sides, the stakes are high,
For sure. It's not about just saying, psychedelics for everyone, no rules. It's about the honest conversation. What's good, what's risky, the ethics of it all.
Exactly. It's individual freedom. But UT, also, keeping society safe, right? We gotta admit, these things can help people heal, grow. But misuse is real too. Can't ignore that.
And research is key there, right? More studies, the rigorous kind, to really know what's what. Benefits, downsides, the whole picture.
100%. Gotta separate the anecdotes from the hard data. How do they work? Long-term effects. What happens at different doses? How you take them.
And everyone's different too, right? What works for one person might not for another. Genes, past experiences, your mental state at the time, so many factors.
Absolutely. No one-size-fits-all solution. That's why it's got to be personalized with guidance, done responsibly. It's not just pop a pill, problem solved. It's integrating it into your whole well-being, what you need specifically.
Like giving people the power to choose, but within a safe, responsible framework.
Bingo. That's the balance. And it takes everyone working together, researchers, the people making laws, doctors, and individuals themselves. We all shape this future.
Speaking of, what about Joe's takeaway? He felt those emotional changes, but also said, don't expect miracles.
I respect that. Managing expectations is huge. Microdosing isn't some cure-all. Gotta be realistic.
Like he's saying, hey, it might help, but it's not magic.
Exactly. And that's what a lot of people, I think, are realizing. Curious, but also, okay, let's not get carried away.
It's about exploring, intentionally, learning, not hoping for a quick fix.
Right. It's a journey, you might say.
Yeah.
Self-discovery, growth, ups and downs, that's part of it.
And sometimes the biggest changes are slow, right? Not overnight, but little shifts in how you see things, how you act.
Well said. It's about the mind-body connection. Realizing well-being isn't just this one thing you achieve, it's ongoing.
This whole talk has really shown, got to be curious, BT, also critical with all this. Open to new things, BT grounded, aware of the risks.
That's the sweet spot, I think. Open mind, but discerning, too.
And that's where good info matters so much, right?
Oh, absolutely. People need the knowledge to make good choices for themselves. What's the deal with psychedelics, benefits, risks, how to stay safe?
Empowering people, but minimizing harm.
Exactly. And it means changing how we think about drug education, harm reduction, not just scaring people, but saying, okay, this stuff exists, here's how to be responsible, here's where to get help if you need it.
Informed choices, not just shame and punishment like we've done for so long.
100%. People will experiment no matter the law, so gotta prioritize safety, helping people.
Keep pushing for better drug policies, right? Ones that actually care about public health, not just locking people up.
Couldn't agree more. Time to rethink all that. Be more compassionate. Addiction, substance use, it's complicated.
Man, this conversation has been eye-opening. It's not just about the science or is it legal or not. It's how we relate to these substances, what they could mean for us individually and as a society.
Deep
Stuff.
No doubt. Super complex, and we're just dipping our toes in. But one thing's for sure, the conversation's changing. What happens next with psychedelics? Well, that's up to us to write.
And we all have a part in that. Talking about it, pushing for good research, good policies, and approaching it all with respect, curiosity, and wanting to minimize harm.
Well said. Our choices matter, now and for the future.
This deep dive, it's given me a lot to think about. Our listeners too, I bet. Before we wrap up this part, let's go back to Joe's message. He really stressed, know the risks, know the law, before even thinking about microdosing or any psychedelics, really. What do you think about that?
Couldn't agree more. Empowering people, but being real about the potential downsides, too.
Taking responsibility for your own well-being. Do your research, understand the law, maybe even talk to an expert if you need to. Don't just jump in blind.
Good advice. I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've covered a ton, but there's always more to learn.
Absolutely. Listeners, we've got links to all the stuff we talked about down in the show notes. Check them out. Keep exploring.
Knowledge is power, as they say. But gotta use it critically. Keep asking questions.
On that note, let's move to the final part of our deep dive. Wrap things up and leave you with some food for thought. All right, so Joe's story, the science, the laws, it's a lot, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. This deep dive wasn't about telling you to microdose or not.
Right, exactly. It's about, giving you the info to make up your own WN mind. We laid it all out, the facts, the stuff we don't know, what different people think about it.
And now it's like, okay, what clicks for you? What parts stuck out? What questions are you left with? That's the important bit.
Maybe you're like, wow, Joe's experience, those benefits sound great. Or maybe you're more, too many unknowns and the legal stuff is scary. It's all good. There's no one right answer.
The key is, think about it critically. Don't just believe everything you hear, right? Dig deeper. Check out those sources we linked. Do your own research.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, remember the bigger picture. Like, where do psychedelics fit in our world going forward? Will things keep changing, laws loosening up, people being more accepting?
Will we see their potential for helping people, or will it be all fear and stigma holding us back? Big questions, not easy to answer.
But here's a thought, okay. Imagine the research keeps going, and it really shows. Psychedelics can help with depression, anxiety, addiction. Could that change how doctors treat people?
Ooh, interesting. Like psilocybin therapy right alongside the usual stuff. That'd be huge. But yeah, lots to figure out if that happens.
For sure. Got to train therapists, make sure it's done ethically, safely. And what about people misusing it, taking advantage? Lots of wrinkles to iron out.
But still, it's a future we could build. So, as you explore this whole microdosing world, psychedelics in general, remember,
stay informed, stay curious, and never stop questioning things.
This deep dive, it's just the starting point. The exploration goes on for all of us. And that's it for today, folks. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of microdosing psilocybin. Until next time, keep those minds open and keep exploring.